What we're looking at now is something called IDEs, and what IDEs stands for is Integrated Development Environment. And before we think about what an IDE does, it is possible to make programs, make software just using very, very simple text editors. Something as simple as Notepad on Windows would be good enough to make an entire program. However, as we start to develop code, and we start especially to develop graphical user interfaces, we find that they make it quite tricky. A very simple text editor just doesn't have certain facilities to help us out. And so all of these tools and extra utilities, when they're combined together into one package, we call it an IDE, an integrated development environment. And the best way to look at some of these tools that help us out is to actually look at an IDE. And so what we've got here is Visual Studio, just an example of an IDE using C#. And we have the ability, first of all, with the graphical user interface with the GUI, I can just drag controls and objects into my graphical user interface, onto the form, and what the IDE is doing is it's writing all of that code underneath in order to place it in the right place and all of the other properties. So let's say on this I've got departure date and an arrival date for a flight program. I don't actually mean to have arrival date. I've got all its properties down here. I can just change the text down here to departure time, for example. If I'm not happy with the size or some other property like the color, all of those properties are listed down here. So it's much easier than having to program them all in. Maybe I've forgotten to put a checkbox or a tick box on here, and so I can align that up. It's also got facilities here. You see the blue lines where it's lining things up for me so that it looks neat and tidy. And then I can go in and I can change the name and say allow other dates, for example. And again, I can line that up so that it lines up with all my other objects. So massive bonuses, and this really does save time using an IDE to create a GUI. Massive bonuses there. The other side of what IDEs offer is much more to do with the programming side. So here already we can see some things which an IDE gives us over, say, Notepad or a very simple text editor. So here you can see that we've got some line numbers, and that's going to be really useful later if we make any mistakes and create any bugs, and it tells us where the line number is. We've also got different words appearing in different colors, and that's called syntax highlighting. So remember, syntax is the things that we're writing, how it gets written, and so it's coloring them differently. The keywords are being colored differently. And so let's type in some code, and this isn't what I would want to happen when the button's clicked, but it's just some example code to show you what's happening. So it's already done some syntax highlighting on the keyword int, and maybe I have another number there. And what it's going to do now is it's going to say to us, first of all, it's telling me that I've already used the variable a, and I'm trying to create a new variable called a. So it's already trying to debug my code for me. It's trying to help me out. If I change this to maybe C, so it's not going to, I'm now allowed to use this variable, but now it's saying it can't convert an integer 145 into a string C. And so it's helping me there debug, and it's found a syntax error in my code. And so I can realize now I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do maybe a name or something. And now it's telling me that I've got these different variables. So if I look here, it's saying in line 27, this is line 27 here, it's saying I've got this variable b, but I do nothing with it. And so what I can do, maybe let's just take this line of code out. If I start using it and I say int c is a plus b, hopefully it will now be happy with a and b because I'm now using them. So those were just some warnings it was giving me. And so it's really useful with an IDE. It's also showing me down here, it's showing me syntax errors that I'm making, it's giving me warnings, so if it thinks I might be doing something wrong, it's going to tell me about that as well. Now I'm going to write a little bit more code here, so just a little loop to show you another feature which can happen within an IDE, which is very useful for debugging. So I'm going to write a quick for loop which will go from 0 up to 10, or 0 to 9 in this case, And don't worry about exactly how this works, it's more just to show you another facility for debugging which you have in an IDE. And so this will just add 1 to A each time it cycles through. So very, very simple. This is a relatively pointless program what it's doing here. I can just use A++ there. So don't worry about what it's trying to do because it's a bit meaningless. However, I want to show you the facility which can help with debugging. Now if I run this program, then it has to build up all of that graphical user interface for me, and it will then show it on the screen. And let's just drag that in so you can see it. Now if I do search for flights, I don't really see anything happen. And it might be in your program you can't detect where some bug is, or you can't detect where something's not working, you've got maybe some logical error in there, or you just can't see what's going on. And so what I can do is I can say within my IDE, I can say I want a breakpoint to occur at this point here. And so this part here has set a breakpoint, and what that will do is it will pause my program at that point. So when I get the int c equals a plus b, the program will be paused at that point, and then I'll be able to step through and take a look at what goes on line by line as it's working. So let's give this a go and drag this in just so you can see it. So when I press search for flights, it now comes in here, and I'm at this point, and not only is it paused at this point, but it's also telling me what's stored in all of these different variables. So A is 10, that's what I expected, B is 20, int C is 0 at the beginning. Now if I run line by line through, so if I hit this one here, step into, then I can see A plus B is 30 and C is now 30. Now I've gone into my for loop, and the first instruction is to set up a new variable called I, which will be 0, and that's what it's done here. So let's move on. Then I've got C, is I less than 10, which it is. And now it's moving down and it's going to go into my A++. So we're expecting the next time this A will be 11 here. And as I work through, it's 11. And then we'll see how it counts up I as it goes through, and it will also increment A as well. And we can see down, if you look down here where I and A are, we can see those numbers moving as I go through the program. And so that's another really, really useful feature for debugging. If your IDE has the facility to put breakpoints in, and then you can step through the code, you can go to where you think the bug's occurring or where you think there's something you want to look at closely, and then you can watch all the variables as they're moving about. And so that's another great facility. In addition to the GUI facilities, you've got a lot of facilities to help with debugging code and testing code, and you've got facilities like syntax highlighting, which just help you look at your code as you're writing it.